The 45 or 50 minutes different with the Thailand, okay? So one of the good change, your speech in in Bangkok, university area. On your left side, you see many kinds of the tuition, the private school building.
The airport at Bagan, or nearby town anyway.
In the center of the country, located on the heart of the dry zone. But very fortunately, we got rain yesterday and last night, so that a little bit brown and green landscaping will provide you. So Bagan also situated 200 feet above sea level. But now the weather is supposed to be warm, but I throw my power for all of you. So the weather, the whole day will be like this. So before we check in the hotel, we are going to visit a few temples. But the most important temple, you know, there are over 2,000 pagodas in temple within 16 square miles. So a lot of things to see, but don't you worry, we are going to show you the highlights ones. So otherwise, when you see too many, then you don't remember which one it was. So Bagan, this ancient city, once the magnificent kingdom. That's why today rich in all the archaeological sites. So Bagan lies on the eastern bank of the Ayeyarwady River. Most people know as Road to Mandalay. You know, the name of the river is Ayeyarwady, but known as Road to Mandalay.
From the airport in Bagan, we're about to visit this temple. I don't know much about it, but it's a very big one. These are the things you can't have. You have to take shoes and socks off every time you go to a temple. Here, pretty fabulous. It's a huge temple. Look at all these funny people.
We're making the most devotion to the Buddha, so heavily built. That's the reason why we are not allowed to climb up. Before we can climb up, you see the stairway, so after they build it, no one cannot climb. Otherwise, people want to touch everything. You look, there are some great glazed tiles on the receding turret. It tells you about all his return. But 1899, 19th century, we had a big problem with the vandalism, you know, vandalism. So some of the glazed tiles were stolen by one of the German geologists. So he sold it to the museum.
I've done a complete circle.
Get them back
to where everybody is sitting,
but many were already destroyed,
getting a little lecture.
From the Second World War with the bombings. This pagoda, built by the most famous king of Bagan, the king of Sri Lanka, from Kandy. But the really good village was still in Kandy, in Sri Lanka. But the king from Bagan, he received the replica. So very quick, the king can use 1,000 people. So he finished building this pagoda within 7 months and 7 days. Also, this pagoda was very important in architecturally. It was the prototype of all later Burmese stupa. So the structure is fairly simple. You look at it, there is a square receding turret, then octagonal base providing for transition. Then bell-shaped stupa rests on that, sharply tapering to the conical final. And this type of the architecture, we call it stupa or pagoda. They are all solid structure, no entry. So you remember that stupa and pagoda, they are all solid structure. structure, no entry. They were built to enshrine the relic of the Buddha, like hair, bones and teeth, but not in every pagoda. But this one has the really, you know, the tooth relic. The rest, they have some religious artifacts structure. And temple, they are all hollow type. There is the porch, so that you can always enter. But when you go inside the temple, you find always Buddha statue. So the temple were built to house the Buddha statue, mainly for worshipping and meditation. Okay, the third one, monastery for the monk. And we used to have the ordination hall. The monk, they also confess for their sin. So they built ordination hall. And we have the library where they keep to house, you know, the book teaching about the Buddha, also, you know, like a medicines architect. So we classify 5 different types of the architect. But in the olden day, they built both brick and wood. Nowadays, you don't see the wooden buildings, but we still have a few. Mostly were destroyed with their old age and natural disaster. Already reached the Nirvana. And also like to explain you about the different style of the Buddha. 11th century, we had more Indian culture influence. That's why if you look at the Buddha face, later one, more Mongoloized or Chinese, round face, ear longer, touching the shoulder with a short neck, a little bit fat stomach, and the fingers, they are all uniform in the same length. Okay, that's the later one. So you remember the earlier ones. Also, there are many different hand positions. We call it mudra. It came from Pali. According to the left hand holding the law. That means reassurance. You got that? So when you see anyone with this hand position, you remember that reassurance. When you see...
There are different aspects every time you turn a corner, there's more. I have a feeling that viewers are going to be pretty bored with temples and stupas by the time we leave Bagan, because there's lots of them here, but meanwhile, aren't they fabulous? And then there's the wonderful little individual things on every corner. This is a big cock, hen, whatever. And here's a nice white elephant. Here are a few young monks all lined up.
Each time I spent a week at the monastery.
Wow. 3 years ago?
Yes. So I spent a week at the monastery. It's very much compulsory.
Okay. Waiting to sell anything at all.
The medium size, they are built by the minister and royal family. The smaller one, they are built by the ordinary people. They don't like when people rebuild. You see the workmanship, very us. Just imagine that. That's the one of the highlights. Now we can see that temple from any direction, even from a quite a distance. But that temple known as the haunted temple. Haunted. And his elder brother, then he had ascended the throne. So after that, in order to wash away of all his sin, he built that.
And the cost of keeping things cool. So please, if you want to buy a drink here, because otherwise leave your shoes on the bus and we'll head into the temple with your cameras. I know, I'm telling you, they're very enterprising.
Well, until 1975 you could actually build a new stupa, but after that you couldn't build a new one, although you could repair an old one. It cost about $10,000 even for a small one, so it was sometimes families would join together and build one. Of course there are millions of them around, and most of them are pretty old. A whole busload of people arrived, monks included. They're all going into the temple. Temple I've decided to ignore. Seen one temple, seen them all, and there's certainly going to be a lot more in the next day or two. This is where temples were pretty much invented. It was the capital once of Burma, Bagan. Crowd of people waiting to try and sell something to the tourists. We're all back on the bus and it's about to take off. So are we.
Okay, so we're going to have people that won't climb. Okay? Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, our next stop involves climbing up some stairs. So, well worth it, but I'm not denying it. There are steep stairs. Not like stairs, but just to give you a warning, if you do want a hand, you simply ask. Oh.
If you want, it's a really good quality. I look here. Okay. How much? Let me know your price. How much?
So many things
I have friends that want to buy postcards. They want my friends to buy postcards.
Elephant restaurant, like most of the preceding ones, has a huge menu illustrated. So I'm going to have chicken curry, I think, which is a mere $3,500 for a small portion, which is about $4.50. And desserts include the banana fritter with honey, pancake, pineapple or bananas, Bagan banana cake, and steamed bananas with coconut milk. They're all like $2,000, which is only $2 or $3. The restaurant is very nice. It overlooks a lake here. And our party, of course, is always on one long big table. I think they're demonstrating some of the dishes over there.
Right, braised duck, chicken egg, green curd. And nice sweet gravy.
We just crossed this wide river. And we're about to awesome buggy ride is scheduled for very soon, but I'm going to stay in the restaurant because my leg is still hurting me, and the bumpy ride doesn't help in the slightest.